I'll start off with a quote from the last book by the late Terry Pratchett. Knowledge is power. Power is energy. Energy is matter. Matter is mass. And mass distorts time and space. This implies that having tons of knowledge is a great thing and can make a great impact on the world. It was not necessarily what he had in mind. Certainly being a genius is seen as a good thing, and wisdom can be defined as being very clever, and therefore a desirable thing to be. But what if I told you that vast fountains of knowledge can in fact be a problem, and in some cases downright harmful? This all came about when I saw an atheist on YouTube put up a video about his time in theology college, and the thumbnail showed some of the beliefs they genuinely held, one of which was knowledge detracts from faith. Like I said, I've only seen the thumbnail and I haven't seen the video, so I don't know how much that is true or just an exaggeration for the sake of clickbait. It cannot be denied that God forbade Adam and Eve from eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and when they did so, he cast them out. This certainly implies that God doesn't want us to have knowledge, and so learning anything other than God's word is sinful by nature. But is this really the case? In James it says that when someone knows the right thing to do but doesn't do it, they have sinned. This can be seen as the biblical definition of sin. It doesn't immediately mean knowledge in itself a sin. It can be implied that it's the path to sin, since knowledge is required in order to know the difference between right and wrong. But one can still cause harm to a person in ignorance and still be held responsible in theory. This isn't just some dogmatic use of biblical hokum. This is actually a scientific phenomenon known as an info hazard. Nerd extraordinaire Kyle Hill did a video on this very topic and has done a far better job than I ever could. So I suggest check out his video on that score, so you can leave a link in the card up there or in the description. I've done my hardest. Granted, he's talking about knowledge of big bad things like homemade superbugs, DIY nuclear bombs, or even half the stuff he talks about on his channel, like the ideal place to push someone, so they will definitely drown, dropping bits of metal from orbit, or hitting them with a chain whip. Just because he claims not to be a supervillain doesn't mean the knowledge he had supplied us can't be used for nefarious purposes. And that is all the point. The right to information is just as dangerous as, well, in my opinion, the right to carry firearms. To some it seems literally to be a God-given right, and has been drafted into laws dating back to the founding of nations. But even within the bounds of the law, it's all too easy for such power to be used in harmful ways, particularly in the wrong hands. So does that mean that being stupid is the best thing? Are all those people who bullied me in school and got low marks the best sort of people to be? Well, if you believe me, I hope not. Granted, a lot of politicians in the British government, to be fair, and their supporters seem to have questionable IQs. I'm not getting political here. But as is proven time and again, the most powerful aren't always the ones who survive, and the most powerful aren't always the ones with the right education lead. High levels of learning in academia can open up opportunities in better positions and give one better credibility on the job sites and employment ladders. But I ask you this: how many of you studied music at school? A stars, and upon leaving school, never picked up an instrument again? All because you found your vocation in business administration. This is a random case, but it makes a difference. I'll give a few more examples. My brother did years of study in English and history at school, hoping to study journalism. Spent 4 years studying history and philosophy for a double first at university. And what's he spent the last 6 years working? Student politics and education reform. Because I think that's what his last job was, I don't remember. Myself, I spent years of effort in the field of physical geography and geochemistry, only to find I prefer outdoor activities and heritage education. And I've never liked history, never liked being taught history. I favoured doing it. It just shows that sometimes we can delve into one area of study and find our vocation in another. It makes us seem like quizmasters, having tons of knowledge stored up, but now can't find a use for it. I think this is where the rub is. Knowledge for the sake of knowledge is a pretty useless thing. A van driver in the Scottish borders can know everything there is to know about the adventures of Arminius, a Roman soldier who defected to the Germanic tribes. But until he starts teaching living history in the forests of Germany, that information is pretty much useless. Yes, having knowledge of things can be useful if you intend to do many quizzes. Even quizmasters can, on occasion, note when a bit of knowledge is actually pointless to know, as Jeremy Paxman has done on numerous occasions on University Challenge. Have I convinced you that knowledge is bad? Unlikely. In fact, I don't think it is. Let me clarify what I mean here. Knowledge is power, but having knowledge is like having money. Okay, if you have a use for it. Otherwise, why do you have it? An example I can give is in the Kingkiller Chronicles, where someone told a story about an arcanist, someone with magic these days, who learned everything that could possibly be learned from the famous university, where everyone goes to learn magic, mysteries, science, and chemistry, all that sort of thing. Since he couldn't go any further there, he decided to go travelling, or chasing the wind, as they put it in that story. The arcanist soon came across a large lake that needed to be crossed and could only be crossed by a lone ferry sailed by a ragamuffin ferryman. He was one of the roaming peoples of the land known as the Ademaru. On the crossing, the arcanist tried engaging the ferryman in conversation about learned topics like Teckham's theories on energy, Teckham's theophany, and all things pertaining to it, only to find the ferryman knew nothing of what he was talking about. He had very little education, and couldn't even read or write, for heaven's sake. The arcanist actually got overwhelmed by this and said that it's every man's duty to educate himself. A man with the benefit of education is no better than an animal. Naturally, the conversation didn't last long after that, and he remained perfectly silent until a storm began to blow up. The ferryman took one look at the storm and said that it would get much worse and his little boat wouldn't last the tempest. So he let him abandon the boat and swim the last stretch to shore. The story ends with the arcanist crying out that he didn't know how to swim. This is a fine example of useful knowledge, how it can be applied in different circumstances. I mean, the Arcanists knew everything there was possible to know about arcane things, but clearly he knew nothing about the Edema Root, and if he got caught in a storm, he was more or less dead. What was the point of learning all that? To give another example, a Stone Age man would in all likelihood be just as, if not more intelligent, than modern man. If we were to meet him, he would actually be overwhelmed by the simplest things that we take for granted, like, say, an iPad, a television, even an electric light. The thing is, though, he has a hand axe, a tool that we would struggle to make. I really don't know how to make a hand axe. Well, I know the theory, you can knock one out in maybe an hour or so, but he can knock one off in about a minute, or not even that. You can use it, and you know what he does with it? He throws it away. Just like we would with a wooden fork. He can make a shelter and bedding to last the night, light a fire to cook food, and identify all manner of safe mushrooms and plants to eat, whilst most of us would struggle to build an IKEA bed without the instructions. Can't fix a hole in our wall, we have to call someone to fix it. And need to ask what mushrooms we can eat when they're not bought from a shop, let alone work out how to cook them, at a microwave, at an oven, without a cooker. We may think we are more intelligent, we are wiser, we are therefore the better beings, because we can read the complete works of Shakespeare or Charles Dickens, understand the quantum laws, the very basis of the things that make up our universe, or speak 7 different languages like a native. But that doesn't mean we can ignore a bit of rabbit being held out by a man who killed it using a pebble and a length of cord made from tree bark, and then cooked the rabbit over a fire that he started with a rock. All our knowledge is going to be completely useless unless we know how to apply it in the everyday world. My other brother, we knew he'd go to university and never come back. That doesn't mean he's a complete dunce. He knows how to live, he knows how to cook, and he knows how to fix a light bulb. He knows how to apply other knowledge to what he needs to do. But surely knowledge is useful to understand the difference between what is right and what is wrong, what is provable and what is unprovable. But one thing I saw in Veritasium's video, there's a hole in the bottom of math, implies that mathematics is unprovable. And so the basis of modern science is based on concepts that is stated to be true, but can't be proven to be so. Sounds a lot like what many people claim religion to be, based on concepts that can't be proven. Now, I know many people will say, it's different. Yeah, right. Or that I'm misunderstanding the point. Now, you may have a point there. But that is what happens when you come across a random piece of information and you don't know how to apply it in the context it's in. Take, for example, yeast. It's a type of fungus. That's a random factoid. If those who just wondered how bread was made heard that it used yeast and that yeast is a type of fungus, many people would be like, eeeh, and probably wouldn't want to have bread in their diet ever again. They would refuse to have anything to do with it. But if you learned that it helped make the bread rise, you would understand its usefulness. If you also know that aeration of bread and other substances of cooking is known as leavening, then that automatically tweaks, well, you know that as well, that the festival of unleavened bread is not just a weird name for a feast. It explains the very concept of it, the fact that it's a festival with bread that has not been given yeast. It's essentially a festival of flatbread, which is probably why so many churches use flatbread or wafers for Holy Communion. Knowledge for its own sake leads to misconceptions. And without the context, this can lead to misunderstanding. Now, I know some people are going to say, hang on a minute, hang on. You should have read the title better. You should have read the thumbnail better. Now, I did come across that self-same video when I was doing research for another video, only to realise I had indeed got it wrong. It wasn't knowledge can lessen faith. It was education can detract from faith. I willingly admit that I was wrong, but I'm willing to stand by everything I said above. I know some people will say, go on, defend that, you can. I can't deny it's an incredible irony that that's from a theology college, and it's not exactly an obscure hypocrisy. However, I will jump to defence that it depends on the faith. In general, maybe. Certainly, I know some people have had drastically different revelations when certain bits of knowledge come to light, or they're educated on different things. In fact, as far as I remember, the atheist who put this self-same video up actually had a similar epiphany, and thus, after weeks and weeks of meditation, came to the conclusion there was no God. I'm not going to blame for that. Especially as he was raised in a fundamentalist household. And anyone that knows fundamentalists knows they can be incredibly stubborn about their faith, to say the very least. But faith can come in all shapes and forms. It can be a childish, explorative faith, with everything to do with it, even everything else. Or a deep-rooted, pious faith that denies all things that are not godly in nature. Namely, fundamentalist faith of someone who was born and raised in a fundamentalist household for many, many years. It was an innocent, explorative faith, learning something about the world, like the sheer amount of cruelty there is, certainly degrades faith for some people. That, however, depends on the education, how the teacher presents the information, from what angle it comes from, and ultimately what the intent of the teacher is. If all they want to do is trot out all the information they have, then we're right back to where we started. Knowledge, no context whatsoever. I've already done a preparation for an essay about someone from the disproved God by, well, many things actually, one which includes the fact that reality clashes with the idea that God is omnibenevolent and all-powerful. Certainly, that, and then see how terrible reality is without fully understanding what's going on. You can easily see how people can lose their faith. However, if the knowledge you gain is geared towards developing understanding, if the teaching style is geared towards developing your understanding of the world, then it can lead to all manner of different discoveries. Some of these may degrade faith, there's no denying that. For example, if you were just told that reality is not the same as what the Christians say, you delve into that, you may indeed say, yes, that is true, and it's even worse than some people say it is. But others can build a stronger faith. For example, if you bear in mind that God isn't just a being of goodness, he's a father figure. He is teaching us to be benevolent. Then you can understand why things need to be bad. Therefore, you can build a much stronger faith. There's a reason why the best way to teach isn't to answer every question, but to ask many questions. Because then, if you go looking for answers, you develop your understanding. Just because you want a plain and straightforward answer doesn't mean it's going to be the best way to get the information. In fact, being given an answer straight off doesn't mean you will understand the reasoning behind it. So is education or knowledge bad? I think depends on what it's used for. If it's just to sound smart and intelligent, or just so you can one-up your mates with trivia, no. If it's used in an area of study or work-based research, then it can be immensely beneficial. How many seconds in 2 years seems like a pointless thing to know? Absolutely pointless. Unless you have to work out the potential velocity of a rocket that is using a new type of fuel that is being given small scale testing and so only lasts for a few seconds, but you know it should keep burning for an extended period of time if you use the right amounts. Knowing the percentage mass of each constituent body part of a woolly mammoth can seem useless until you start studying fossils and calculating the overall body mass of, say, megafauna, which gives you a good indication of speed, strength, and stamina, and therefore its likely food sources and also what its predators are most likely going to be and how those predators will survive on that carcass. I feel the best way to sum that up is understand the difference between being smart and being wise. In layman's terms, a smart person knows stuff, a wise person knows what he doesn't know. That's not necessarily the same thing as, say, being clever and being cleverer. By knowing what he doesn't know, I mean a wise person knows when he doesn't know the answer, and therefore either seeks outside help or seeks to learn from someone else. I can also say clever involves making do with what you happen to know, what you happen to have, but wisdom is important and show flaws, our flaws, more effectively than just being sharp. Just because you know enough and you're aware, hang on, I don't know that, but I'm going to just see what I got, doesn't mean your smarts will get you through every situation. A wise person is always willing to learn. That is where education comes in. Educating people is how information gets put into context and understandable formats. All of this is extremely important, and the internet available helps sometimes, but unless you're willing to see how each of those bits of information apply to others and how you can get to them, it is completely useless. So, to conclude, knowledge is merely a useful thing. Education is how we put that knowledge to good use. Depending on the teacher or whatever the student is looking to do, it can be good or bad. But on their own, they mean very little, and in the wrong hands can prove very, very dangerous. It's how we handle them that tells us a lot more about the world we live in, and then we can benefit people the most. So education without application and knowledge without context are dangerous. Put them all together in a structured way and get people to understand what they mean. That can be oh so powerful. And certainly keep us all safe.